Well, hello all. This is Bernardo Brito from Geostrat S.A. presenting this webinar from Quito, the capital of Ecuador. First of all, I wish you health and safety for yourselves and your loved ones. Secondly, thanks for listening to this webinar. I hope to make the best out of your time. I'm Operations Manager at Geostrat S.A. with a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in metals and energy finance from the Royal School of Mines in London. Today I'm going to talk about the historic opportunity Ecuador has for its economy with the development of the mining industry, in particular during this significant economic downturn. I've called this talk the role of mining in the economic recovery of Ecuador, next steps to development. First of all, we quickly introduce ourselves. We are Geostrat S.A, an Ecuadorian company founded in 2013, specialized in the Northern Andes, composed of earth scientists and professionals. We have more than 20 academic publications on the regional and local geology, with one mining discovery. Our principal, Dr. Cristian Vallejo, was project manager at Salazar Resources when they discovered the VHMS El Domo. Our main office is in Quito, with the lab in the outskirts of Quito, and we specialize in mining exploration solutions, corporate solutions, our own lab consulting, and specialized training. The agenda for the day is divided in three parts. The first part called Where We Are. Second part is the question, where are we going? And the third part is how to accelerate the development. First part, we evaluate how the Ecuadorian economy is doing. Ecuador has had two major impacts, two major external shocks with this crisis. Other crises typically involve unhealthy financial system, like in the late 90s, or typical monetary and external crises, like the lost decade of the 80s, which happened across Latin America. Yet another type of crisis happens with systematic and economic investment, like it has happened in the United States with the stock market or the real estate market, which we call a bubble. Ecuador does not suffer these types of crises, so the solution is much harder. As you will see, the two external shocks have been the oil shock and the pandemic. Let's go with the first shock, the oil shock. Here's a graph of the WTI price fix for oil, upon which Ecuadorian oil is benchmarked, basically in Apple unoriented oil qualities that have a discount vis-a-vis WTI, given the higher sulfur and lower API. OPEC cartel, well, the OPEC cartel hasn't been able to control the price, and it's on a free fall from 60 at the beginning of the year, going all the way down to negative territory, and now sitting at around $20 to $25 a barrel, which is more than 50% fall in the oil price. The budget of the government of Ecuador was set with an oil price of 51.30, and we are much lower right now. Ecuador's exports are made of 29% made of oil. Right now we have the pipelines ruptured that are coming back online. The Esmeraldas refinery, one of the three refineries in Ecuador, has had a major breakdown. And well, overall in the international markets, the OPEC is losing market share. And now the market share sits at 30%, which is one of the lowest in a decade or so. And it becomes very difficult for them. The US has become the largest producer of oil in the world with the shale oil boom. And now the freedom to export is making it more competitive in international markets. These have left the OPEC under weak footing. Looking long term, we gotta ask ourselves, as Ecuador, how long are we going to produce oil? Ecuador holds around 2.8 billion barrels of proved reserves, which is about 15 more years of production, but we wonder if that oil is going to come to markets. So overall, Ecuador needs to think of a new sources of income. It remains vulnerable to international shocks, in particular in oil. Talking about the pandemic, we have a overall shutdown of the economy. Here's the real GDP change year over year. The IMF had forecast pre-COVID 0.2% for this year. The Ecuadorian economy was on a very weak path with high indebtedness by the public sector and low investment. It was a meager growth forecast for this year, and now we are in an even worse position with some banks already putting out their forecasts. Citi at 3.6%, Barclays at negative 4%, Goldman Sachs at negative 5.7%, World Bank at negative 6%, and even worse, IMF at negative 6.3% in the latest forecast. The IMF has called this the worst recession since the Great Depression. It would be the worst crisis in 90 years. The most important sectors of Ecuador that generate US dollars for us, because we are a dollarized economy, are the shrimp, flowers, tourism, immigrant transfers from abroad, and entertainment. All have been badly hit by the crisis. The banking crisis, the last major crisis of Ecuador, was in 1998, and it was a contraction of negative 4.7%. It was basically a currency crisis that had a faster rebound. The current economic environment is much more complex. Ecuador is dollarized and can push for asset purchases like the Fed in the US or the ECB in Europe. So we have to ask ourselves that Ecuador, given the limitations to economic and monetary, fiscal and monetary policy, we might be having one of the worst economic impacts in Latin America. So in summary, where are we? We have an economic contraction estimated at 6%, deflation with high real interest rate, unemployment to shoot up above 22%, increased poverty increasing to 31% from 25% or so, problems to honor external debt, or Ecuador has already reprofiled its debts, problems to finance the fiscal deficit, which is a huge gap for this year. We have limited liquidity, low international reserves. We are very vulnerable on the monetary side, and high uncertainty because the government cannot enact new reforms. This is a painting on your right by Ecuadorian painter Camilo Egas, who lived in New York during the Great Depression. He produced some very poignant paintings at the time. We're moving on to the second point. Where are we going? Well, let's see first what the Ecuadorian economy needs for this crisis. We need output. Ecuadorian economy needs to go back to basics and start producing more, and that involves investment. Investment that doesn't come by decree, but by productivity and competitiveness. Ecuador needs to safeguard the dollarization. And overall, using the US dollar has been a positive development for a country with currency devaluations around the corner. Ecuador turning to Argentina could have turned into Argentina or Venezuela if not for the US dollar. We need to create employment. Ecuador has huge underemployment. Around 50 to 60% of the Ecuadorians work informally in underemployment. This is not sustainable. We need fresh foreign capital for risk investments and long-term horizons. This is key to sustain the dollarization. And we need a more competitive private sector to absorb the reductions from the state government. The state needs to reduce its size in the economy, but we need to make the private sector more competitive. Our neighbors in the continent like Peru, Colombia, and Chile attract huge amounts of foreign investment. And we need to ask ourselves, why would the investment come to Ecuador? What makes it more attractive to come here? So the government really needs to think on what to make attractive to come to invest in Ecuador. There has been foreign investment in Ecuador, a bit of foreign investment in the last few years, and basically on the consumer sector of Ecuador, but that didn't generate enough to sustain the economy. We need investment that produces exports so we get more currency. And we need to diversify our economy. Our economy is too dependent on very few sectors. And well, the Goldilocks industry that can meet all these conditions is the mining industry, as I shall demonstrate. Let us remember what the Italian naturalist Antonio Raimondi said a few centuries ago about Peru, that Peru is a beggar sitting on a box of gold. That may be said for Ecuador today. Quick introduction on the mining in Ecuador, largely unexplored in a very relevant, mining relevant continent in the world. Our next door neighbor, Peru, second largest producer of copper, zinc, and silver. Colombia, largest producer of thermal coal, nickel, and gold. We've had major world-class deposits with more than 1 billion tons of ore, like Alpala at Cascabel, Yurimagua, and other projects rumored to be huge as well. We have new types of deposits, in particular in the Jurassic Cordillera, such as stratabound deposits. There's potential for PGEs in the northern part of the country, laterites, etc. Fiscal regime has been improving as well. We have a windfall tax that was withdrawn, and now you know how to estimate the sovereign share for the government when you start to pay it, and called the sovereign adjustment. And there are new court judgments that are showing are de-risking the overall legal risks of the industry in Ecuador. So talking about the last point I mentioned, Ecuador needs to diversify the economy. Here we have a plot where in black is oil, in yellow is gold, and in blue is copper. We shall see first of all the inverse correlation between gold and oil, which would make it very, very beneficial for the Ecuadorian economy in case of shocks, as we are going through now. We have higher volatility, as we can see in oil. We have less volatility in metals. We have better fundamentals long-term for metals. As we all know, the changing to renewable energy and clean energy will require much more metal intensity. So overall, turning into mining would make us will make the Ecuadorian economy less vulnerable to shocks. Talking about foreign investment, which is what we require immediately. I have here made an estimate of the overall capital expenditures and sustaining capital expenditures plus exploration investments that would come to Ecuador if we develop all the projects available. So these are the projects already developed: Fruta del Norte and Mirador copper mine. Rio Blanco is still struggling a bit. We hope it comes into fruition soon. And we expect Loma Larga to come online. San Carlos Pananza copper project, very big, also to come online. Yurimagua world-class project. We expect it to come also on the investment and construction. Cascabel, Ruta del Cobre, Cangrejos Gran Bestia, Curipamba, La Plata small VHMS, and we've also added some exploration that should be growing through time. So to contextualize this into the overall economy, we have to see the GDP with estimates from 2020 on. We would be coming back to the same level of production by 2023. We expect mining investment as a percentage of GDP to reach up to 4%, which is a huge amount given that we are contracting 6% this year, and it will make the biggest part of the overall foreign direct investment in Ecuador. Talking about exports, we look at our main two projects, Fruta del Norte and Mirador, are coming online with production just recently. We expect that the next few years are going to be investment years, so we won't have many exports in the next 5 years, except for the two projects already producing. However, that will be if we add investment plus exports as a percentage of GDP, we're talking about that we're getting closer to 5% of GDP pretty soon, which is we make us a full-blown mining country. In terms of employment, I have made estimates. First of all, with the projects that already employ people, I've used actual data, which are Fruta del Norte and Mirador, a Rio Blanco, a very small project. But I've added all the overall direct and indirect employment at a ratio of 3 indirect jobs for 1 direct job. And we're looking to approach 100,000 jobs if we develop the industry fully. I have made estimates for every single project, with the ones with more intensive investment, more intensive works requiring more employees, and also I've added some of the exploration. So we would be approaching 100,000 jobs in the industry with direct and indirect jobs. So moving on. That's exploration. Moving on, the last part of the webinar, how to accelerate development. Current initiatives that we have currently in the market, in the mining market of Ecuador. The government is withdrawing the tailings regulations. We have a new, more competitive staking of the licenses, more competitive staking process to stake areas for exploration. We are joining the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, and the industry has become of national interest with support from the high authorities, and it's really a strategic sector that is being reaffirming its position in the country. However, I am offering here a few advice for the government in starting with the economic policy. We need to reduce the external vulnerability with savings like Norway does, UAE, Qatar. We need a sovereign wealth fund ASAP, or we need to hedge oil like Mexico does. We need to reduce the state dependency of the economy. With 40% of the GDP being the state, we cannot continue depending on the state. We need to improve foreign investment. We need to enact again bilateral and multilateral investment treaties or trade agreements. We need to attract investment in higher industrial processes, which means higher, more value added. We need industrial parks and duty-free areas where we can add value to our commodities. We need to improve the local capital markets that are almost incipient. In the mining policy, I propose regulations for dialogue with local communities, and the social license is something that right now it's difficult everywhere in the world, and we need to take initiative on that. Remove the red tape for the regulations. We need to be more expedited in the permitting. Attract longer investments like the POX plant that was proposed initially by Kinross at Fruta del Norte, bulk terminals for our bulk materials or bulk commodities, blending terminals, etc. Initiatives to incentivize the break-even projects. There are quite a few large mining projects in Ecuador that are not economic. We need to think how we're gonna help those projects. Fight illegal mining. We have a burgeoning illegal mining sector that we need to stop on its tracks, and we need to redraw the geological map and the anomalies map for the exploration sector. So in conclusion, the mining sector could contribute the following to the Ecuadorian economy: investment and economic growth in a historic recession scenario, diversification for the economy to reduce vulnerability to shocks, preserve the dollarization with foreign capital and exports, development projects under transparency, and employment generation, which is the most important thing right now for the country. I thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time. Please write to my email in case you have any questions, or go to our website at Geostrats, and S at the end, geostrats.com. Thank you.